security. Food security is the measure of the ability of food and individuals' ability to access it. Four dimensions of food security. Food security exists when all people, at all times, have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preference for an active and healthy life. From this definition, four main dimensions of food security can be identified. Physical ability of food. Ability addresses the supply side of food security and is determined by the level of food production, stock level, and net trade. Economic and physical access to food. An adequate supply of food at the national or international level does not in itself guarantee household level food security. Concern about insufficient food access have resulted in a greater policy focus on incomes, expenditure, markets, and prices, and achieving food security objectives. Food utilization. Utilization is commonly understood as the way the body makes the most of various nutrients in the food. Sufficient energy and nutrient intake by the individuals is the result of good care and feeding practice, food preparation, diversity of diet, and extra household distribution of food. Combined with good biological utilization of food consumed, this determines the nutritional status of individuals and stability of the other three dimensions over time. Even if your food intake is adequate today, you are still considered to be food insecure if you have inadequate access to food on a periodic basis, risking a deterioration of your nutrient status. Adverse weather conditions, political instability, or economic factors, unemployment, rising food prices may have an impact on your food security status. For food security objectives to be realized, all four dimensions must be fulfilled simultaneously. The duration of food insecurity. Food insecurity analysts have defined two general types of food insecurity: chronic food insecurity, transitory food insecurity. Chronic food insecurity is long-term or persistent, occur when people are unable to meet their minimum food requirements over a sustained period of time. Results from extended periods of poverty, lack of asset, and inadequate access to productive or financial resource can be overcome with typical long-term development measures also used to address poverty, such as education or access to productive resources such as credit. They may also need more direct access to food to enable them to raise their productive capacity. Transitory food insecurity is short-term and temporary. It occurs when is a sudden drop in the ability to produce or access enough food to maintain a good nutritional status. Short-term shocks and fluctuation in food ability and food access, including year-to-year variation in domestic food production, food prices, and household incomes. Transitory food insecurity is relatively unpredictable and can emerge suddenly. This makes planning and programming more difficult and requires different capacity and types of intervention, including early warning capacity and safety net programs. Example: concept of seasonal food security falls between chronic and transitory food insecurity. It is similar to chronic food insecurity as it is usually predictable and follow a sequence of known events. However, as seasonal food insecurity is of limited duration, it can also be seen as recurrent transitory food insecurity. It occurs when there is a cyclical pattern of inadequate ability and access to food. This is associated with seasonal fluctuation and the climate. Cropping patterns, work opportunities, or labor demand and disease. The security of food insecurity. When analyzing food insecurity, it is enough to know the duration of the problem that people are experiencing, but also how intense or severe the impact of the point identified problem is on the overall food security and nutrition status. This knowledge will influence the nature, extent, and urgency of the assistance needed by affected population groups. Different skills or pieces to grade or classify food security have been developed by food security analysts using different indicators and cut-off points of benchmark. Measuring the severity of undernourishment. The measure of hunger compiled by FAO, defined as undernourishment, refers to the proportion of the population whose dietary energy consumption is less than a predetermined threshold. This threshold is country-specific and is measured in terms of the number of kilocalories required to conduct sedentary or light activities. The undernourished are also referred to as suffering from food deprivation. Vulnerability. The dynamic nature of food security is implicit when we talk about people who are vulnerable to experiencing food insecurity in the future. Vulnerability is defined in terms of the following three critical dimensions. Vulnerability to an outcome from a variety of risk factors because of an inability to manage those risks. Indeed, a person can be vulnerable to hunger even if he or she is not actually hungry at a given point in time. Vulnerability analysis suggests two main intervention options. Number one, reduce the degree of exposure to hazard. Increase the ability to cope. By accounting for vulnerability, food security policies and programs broaden their efforts from addressing current constraints to food consumption to include actions that also address future threats to food security.